Good evening, and welcome everyone. It's so lovely to see some familiar faces and a few new faces, and I'm sure there's more to come. So my name is Marjorie, and our tech host, and the one that we're also grateful to have here is Sachin. So huge shout out to you, Sachin, who did an amazing job of coordinating and putting all of the technical aspects for this course so that we could hear, see, and have everything functioning smoothly this evening. And I'm really excited and grateful to you, Bante, for offering to teach this course. Those of you might have had the opportunity to attend the last series that uh, that you did on the disciples of the Buddha will know just what an inspiring teacher you are and your unique ability to make the teachings both personal and universal. And I also know that this evening is jam-packed and you have so much to cover. And so without saying anything further, I would like to invite us all to offer three bows of respect to Bante, to welcome him, and to then begin the teachings and explain the structure of our course. So please join me in bowing three times to Amarasiri.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, thank you for that introduction, Marjorie. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see all of you online. So here at the monastery, I have Tan Padipo with me, and we have um, Kate, Boyan, and Sebastian. So we are here speaking to you from the library at the Bhikkhu Vihara. So as usual, we'll start off by paying homage to our teachers. We use by and you know everyone here will chant the Itipiso. So please sit back and just enjoy the chanting and bring to mind all the wonderful qualities of the Buddha, of Ajahn Chah, Lumpur Liam, Lumpur Sumedo, Lumpur Viradamo, all are great teachers in the Sangha. Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijjacharana Sampanno Sugato Lokavidho Anuttaro Purisadhamma Sarati Satta Deva Manu Sanang Buddho Bhagavati Sava Katho Bhagavata Dhammo Samditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Pachatang Veditabho Vinyu Kiti Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Ujupatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Nyaya Patipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Samichi Patipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Yadidan Chattari Purisa Yuga Niyatta Purisa Pukkalaye Sabhagavato Savaka Sangho Ahuneyo Pahuneyo Dakkhineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Punyakhetang Lokasati. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'll just give a brief introduction of this session. So since this is an online course, we'll talk a little bit about online etiquette, then do a bit of a course overview, and then get into all the topics we're going to be discussing today. Um, so these 4 sessions are slightly different to the previous set of sessions that I did, in that we will be incorporating a short guided meditation component to this. There will also be an opportunity where, thanks to Sachin's expertise, all of you will be dispersed into breakout rooms and you'll have the opportunity to discuss a little bit. So it's more like an interactive course as well. So not just me talking. So we'll start off with what this session and then the next 3 sessions look like. And finally, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers and closing remarks. What I would like to also say is that these sessions kind of build up on one another. So it's not like last time where if you missed, say, the session on Venerable Sariputta, you could always plug in to, the next session or the session after that. So they do build up one on top of the other. So if by any chance you miss any session when it's happening, then Sachin would upload the video onto the Google Drive. And so please make sure you watch that before attending the next session. The Google Drive will also contain this PowerPoint that I'm using. It'll also contain some reading material. And if you'd like to, please refer to the reading material before the session. It'll enrich it, but the reading material can be used even afterwards. So let's say you're rewatching the video or you're revisiting the PowerPoint. Then for clarification, that reading material that's been uploaded would come in handy. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to start off. This course is designed to give an introduction to the basics of Theravada Buddhism, right? So what is this form that we use that is called Theravada? Why is it called Theravada? Etc., etc. And then to begin with, the most basic element of any form of Buddhist philosophy, any form of Buddhist practice, whether it's Theravada or another school, would be to start with this concept of the 3 jewels or the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And we'll build up on that. So what is this idea of the Buddha? What is this idea of the Dhamma? What is this idea of the Sangha? How do they help us in the spiritual life and with spiritual practice? And then how, from that as a starting point, how we can visit other aspects of Buddhism. So today we'll talk about the 3 jewels or the triple gem. Next week we will talk about concepts of Kamma, Rebirth, Anatta, and then week 3 we'll focus on virtuous living and harmonious cultivation, sila and samadhi. And finally, we'll talk about panya or wisdom. So as you can see, these sessions kind of build up one on top of the other. Okay. So then, to begin with, what is Buddhism? So 2017, Lumpur Suchito spent the winter retreat here at the Sarana. And he'd have weekly Dhamma talks in the evenings during the Vanpra Puja. So someone asked him, says, what is Buddhism? So I think the answer he gave is the best answer I've ever heard. So the question was, Bhante, what is Buddhism? So he thought for a while and he said, Buddhism is a word. And I thought that was brilliant. And then he expanded. Buddhism is a word and it has two parts, Buddh and ism, right? Buddh is this idea of awakening, this opportunity of awakening, this faculty of awakening, this inclination towards awakening, right? All those things that are found inside. The ism aspect is the container that allows this content of opening. So the forms that we use, the theoretical aspects that are used to guide this awakening, the basic framework that we use in order to not only to cultivate, but also to experience this moment of awakening, or these moments of awakening, or awakening as a reality, right? So the you have the goal, which is awakening, and then you have vehicles that allow us, that take us to this awakening. And these vehicles are called yana. In Pali, they're called yana. So today, when you look at the world of Buddhism, you basically have Theravada, which is the southern school of Buddhism, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And then you have the northern schools of Buddhism, which are basically Mahayana, the great vehicle, and Vajrayana, which is the diamond vehicle. Now, for someone absolutely new to Buddhism, it's important to keep in mind, and important to avoid confusion, or probably this is a question, oh, I've heard this thing called Hinayana. What is Hinayana? Well, Hinayana is another name for Theravada. So Theravada, the meaning of the word Theravada is the voice of the elders, or the teachings of the elders, or the words of the elders. So Thera is elder, Vada is word, speech, teaching. Earlier on, it was called Hinayana, right? And let's not get into why, but Hinayana just meant the smaller vehicle. And then later on, it was found that, this isn't a very respectful name. So everyone said, okay, we're not going to use the word Hinayana anymore. We're going to start using Theravada. So if you come across a book printed in the 1940s or something, and you might come across the word Hinayana, they're just talking about Theravada. Okay, so that's just a note on the names. So the northern schools, as we see them today, basically Mahayana, which is found in China, Japan, Korea, the northern parts of Vietnam. And we have Vajrayana, which is the diamond vehicle. Zen is part of Mahayana. Zen Buddhism is part of Mahayana. Some forms of Mahayana that are very prominent are the Pure Land practices, then some of these Japanese schools, Nichiren and all of that. That's Mahayana. Vajrayana is, the center is in Tibet, but then it's also very prevalent in places like Mongolia, Kalmykia, Bhutan. So all of these are Vajrayana. Vajrayana is probably the most recent format, or the most recent school of Buddhism. So it incorporates Buddhist principles with animist traditions, with tantric traditions. Mahayana is the Sanskrit school. So a lot of the agamas that are that's the guiding doctrine of the Mahayana schools. All of that is found in Chinese, but translated from Sanskrit, right? Theravada, on the other hand, is the Pali school. So this is the southern tradition. And Pali was the language, many people say that this was the language that the Buddha spoke in. But actually not. The Buddha spoke in many dialects that were used in the Ganges region during the time of his existence. And that group of languages or that family of languages is called Prakrit. So he would teach when he was in Vesali, he would speak in the local, and basically all of these dialects of Prakrit are more or less quite mutually intelligible. So someone from Pataliputra, which is present day Patna, would be able to understand someone in Kuru, so in present day Haryana, right? So they would be, so they, people would understand, but they were distinct dialects. So the Buddha would address people in their local language. And then later on, when the suttas and the Vinaya Pitaka was compiled, they felt that they need a standardized language that would bridge all of these dialects, and hence Pali was created in order to preserve the teachings of the Buddha in a scriptural format. So the southern school, Theravada, which is found in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, lower parts of Vietnam, southern parts of Vietnam, is also called the Pali school, the Pali tradition, because the Vinaya Pitaka, so we'll come to the Pitakas. So all the scriptural knowledge that is used in the southern schools are used, they are in Pali. So they are not in Sanskrit, they are not in Chinese, they are not in Tibetan, they are in Pali. So we use Pali as our scriptural language. Okay. So, like we said, the southern school, which is primarily Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, is the kind of is the school that my lineage comes from. So Ajahn Chah, the Ajahn Chah tradition, the Thai forest tradition, all of that is part of Theravada. So Sri Lanka, Myanmar, all of these places. So what distinguishes Theravada from Mahayana or Vajrayana? Primarily, it is called the Southern School. It is also called the Pali School. The suttas and the content of the Vinaya, content of the Abhidhamma, all of that is in Pali, right? There are other distinguishing factors, but for the time being, as this is just an introduction, I'm just going to leave it here. So then, when we come to the first idea of the triple gem or the three jewels, this is again, this is kind of almost similar across these schools, across Theravada, Vajrayana, Mahayana, doesn't matter. This concept of the three jewels, concept of the triple gem is the same thing. So you have three particular aspects, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And we'll talk about each of these in a bit. But before that, I'd just like to kind of take your attention to these little pictures that I have displayed. So you see this footprint near this thing called the Buddha. So, and then you have the wheel that represents the Dhamma. And then you have another motif down below. You have some people in robes who are paying homage to those three wheels. And we'll talk about those three wheels. These three wheels are prominently featured on a high pillar in order to show their elevated status. So we'll come to that. So initially, in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta and in some of the other Buddhist teachings, the Buddha said he did not want any images created of himself, right? So very early on, when we look at Buddhist symbolism, Buddhist iconography, we don't find Buddha Rupas at all. What we do find are footprints like this. We'll find the Buddha being represented as a Bodhi tree, the Buddha being represented as an empty throne, or the Buddha being there's this there's a way in which a divine umbrella is represented. So he's represented in all these different aspects. So it was kind of a form of the Buddha that was being venerated, but it wasn't actually a human form. So it was a formless form, right? Which was representative of the Buddha. The Dhamma, again, how can you represent the teachings, right? So it's represented as the wheel. And this is also because the Buddha's first teaching is the Dhamma Chakka Pavattana Sutta. So he says, life is like a wheel, keeps going round and round. Samsara is like a wheel that keeps going round and round, never ending, right? And his teachings help us transcend this wheel. So we can picture ourselves as little hamsters running around the wheel. And what we are trying to do is get off of that wheel, right? So get out of the rat race, however you want to call it. So the Dhamma is usually represented as a wheel. And then the Sangha is the group of people who are practicing the teachings of the Buddha in the form of the Dhamma. So we'll unpack each of these things. So first one, the Buddha, right? There are many, many aspects of the Buddha, and we'll talk about all of those in a little bit. But primarily, you have the historical Buddha. We'll talk about the story of the historical Buddha. And the historical Buddha is an ideal, right? So some people say, oh yeah, the Buddha really existed. Some people say, well, how do you know he existed? There's always the cynical aspect of the mind that says, is it really true? Was he really there? They say that about the Buddha. They say that about Jesus. They say that about the Ramayana, Mahabharata. Wherever there's opportunity to doubt, the human mind flourishes. So there'll always be doubt. There'll always be cynicism. That's just the way the world is, right? But more importantly, instead of getting caught in that doubt, did the Buddha really exist? Was he really born in this part of India in the 4th or the 5th century BC? Instead of getting caught up with all of this nitty gritty, and instead of getting really caught up in all the details, these details may be very important to a historian, they may be very important to a scholar, but they're not really important or pertinent to us as spiritual aspirants, right? Like for me personally, it doesn't matter when the Buddha was born or when he died. What he taught is of primary importance to me, right? What he lived for, how he lived, how did he develop, what was his persona, what was his achievement during what really marked his life, right? All these things are more important. So when we talk about the Buddha, we can look at it from two angles. One angle is this historical personage that existed. Second angle is this internal aspect of the Buddha, internal aspect of awakening. How does it really affect me? What is going on inside of me? Where is this potential for me to awaken? Right? So I just wanted to set the stage that whenever we talk about the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, there are these two kind of vantage points that we can look from. One is the external representation. So the Buddha is this human being who lived at a certain time. He was a very great teacher and he taught all of this. How does it really affect me internally? How does it affect my practice? Second thing, what we call the Dhamma. Yeah, these are the teachings of the Buddha. Today we find them in three kind of divisions. You have the monastic discipline, which is called the Vinaya. You have his teachings, which is called the Dhamma. And then you have the Sangha, who are the people who who follow all this, right? The Dhamma externally are the teachings that are compiled in these scriptures, right? But again, another way of looking at it is how we are able to apprehend the truth of this very moment. That is the Dhamma of this very moment. So the word Dhamma in Pali or the word Dharma in Sanskrit, again, is an umbrella term. It's used to denote something that is natural. So nature, you can say, oh yeah, that's just his. In India, in Indian languages today, you can, if someone says, oh, that's just his dharma, it could mean that you're talking about that person's innate characteristics or unique characteristics. Could mean personality. It could mean occupation, could mean a certain commitment, it could mean a calling. So my dharma is the dharma of a monastic. Someone else's dharma would be the dharma of a layperson. That's another way the word dharma is used, or the word dhamma is used. Or another way is the laws of nature, right? It is the dharma of water to be wet. It is the dharma of fire to be warm, so on and so forth. So the Dhamma is a spectrum term. So it's not just represents all these books we have on our bookshelves, which contain all these discourses, which contain the Vinaya, but it also is the very truth that manifests in my heart moment to moment, in all our hearts, moment to moment, right? So again, the external aspect and the internal aspect. Similarly, Sangha. So the word Sangha in Pali, same thing in Sanskrit, Sangha, just means coming together, union, collection, group, right? And this could be a group of people. But in essence, this is companionship, mentorship, noble friendship, a good peer group. There are many, many ways of looking at it. So we'll unpack all of these as we go along. Okay. But then when we talk of the three jewels or we talk of the triple gem, there are certain aspects of the triple gem or the three jewels that are really intrinsic in guiding our spiritual growth or in guiding our spiritual development. These are also aspects by which these can be used as tools to for us to improve in our spiritual journey, for us to progress in our spiritual journey. So the first is Saddha. Okay, so in Pali, it's Saddha. In Sanskrit is Shraddha. Comes from the root Shra or Shrad. And Shrad is this potential to strive, this potential to put in effort, this potential to stick with, or in other words, a sense of commitment. So many people translate the word Saddha as faith or belief, which is fine. But I don't think faith or belief really captures the essence of the word Saddha. Because faith or belief is often approached from a Judeo-Christian standpoint. I have to believe in X, Y, and Z. If I don't believe in X, Y, and Z, my life will be horrible. I'm a horrible human being, and therefore I'll go to hell. Right? But if I do believe in X, Y, and Z, then I'm a good person. Whatever I do is good. And then this being above will be happy. Therefore, I'll end up in heaven. This concept doesn't really exist in Indic religions. Even in Hinduism, if you go deeper into even the theistic schools of Hinduism, Shraddha doesn't actually, in some schools it does, but generally it doesn't. Belief is not connotated in the same way as in a Judeo-Christian setting. So what does Saddha mean in the Buddha's teachings? Well, there are many suttas which talk about Saddha, but the Buddha very clearly says that you listen to something, right? and you hear it, you take it on board, and then you work with it in your mind. You kind of take the idea apart, think about it a little bit. Then you put it into action. Once you put it into action, you can evaluate its results. And if the results are good, if the results are beneficial, then you know that this is good and this is beneficial, and you stick with it. Right? So, this commitment that is born out of wise trying. So, whenever we speak of saddha, it is linked with wisdom, it is linked with panya, especially in the Buddhist context and in generally in Indic kind of philosophies. Saddha is not this idea of blind belief at all. It is something that is born out of hearing a teaching, thinking about it, understanding it at the intellectual level, bringing it inside, cultivating it inside, working with it inside, applying it to life, and seeing the result of that application. And the result of that application is saddha. Then you know, okay, this really works for me. So I'm going to try my best to continue with this. I'm going to try my best to move ahead with this, to stick with this. That kind of commitment. So then saddha becomes natural. Saddha becomes something that feeds itself automatically, right? It doesn't need that extra impetus each and every time. And saddha then becomes something that becomes almost second nature to us. Right? When we often see this, when someone new comes into the monastery, they really don't know the etiquette. So when they come into the Dhamma hall, they don't know that they have to bow to the Buddha statue. After day 2 or day 3, it becomes totally natural. The first thing they do when they walk into the Dhamma hall is to bow to the shrine, right? Because they see the value in it. They see that it's wholesome. They see that their peers are doing the same thing, right? And they find the value. So if they don't find the value in it, no one's going to do it, right? Or if it becomes totally against their beliefs or principles, no one's really going to do it. So it is something that kind of has the ability, once it gets in, once that initial commitment is made, it takes on a life of its own internally. So that's an important aspect of, and an important virtue, quality, characteristic of the three jewels or the triple gem. Once we see their value, it almost becomes an automatic part of our belief system, automatic part of what we love, what we venerate, what we have respect for. Right? And the Buddha very clearly states that saddha is the gateway to nibbana. It is the seed from which nibbana grows. So if there's no saddha, there's absolutely no chance of release. There's absolutely no chance of any kind of freedom, right? Because saddha encompasses all of these things. It's not just a belief, oh, I believe in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and then I go out and I cheat people, I get drunk and I come home and, no, that's not saddha. That's not saddha. Saddha is, you hear the teachings, take it in, evaluate it, apply it, and derive value from it. So the litmus test of saddha is how effective this is in our lives. So if I have heard a teaching and I've tried it and I have applied it, how effective is it in my life? How is it manifesting? Right? That is the litmus test. And that is the way saddha functions. So it is the gateway to freedom. It is the seed of nibbana. And the Buddha says, Prasadam jnana dassana. So this idea of vision, true knowledge, becomes pleasing, becomes pleasant only if it is accompanied by Saddha. Right? So it's a very heartfelt thing. So let's say someone has an experience, and this experience remains an intellectual thing, and there's nothing in the heart that is blossoming or blooming. There's no there's no happiness that is arising as a result of it. Then it's a dry intellectual pursuit. That's not Saddha. That's what that's what happens in the realm of philosophical debate. That's what happens in the realm of kind of scholastic research, perhaps. But that's not what happens in true spiritual path. The heart is a very, very important component of the spiritual path. And Saddha is a very important aspect of the heart. Then we come to Sarana. So the word Sarana in Pali, Sharana in Sanskrit, it usually means protection, it means refuge. And whenever we talk about Buddhism as a form, right, whether it's Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, it doesn't matter, everything starts by taking refuge. So even a ceremony like the Katina ceremony, even a ceremony like the Uposatha that the monks and the nuns have to do every fortnight, always starts by reminding ourselves that we have gone to the three jewels for protection. We have gone to the three jewels for refuge, right? And so this idea is that it's not that the Buddha is sitting somewhere in the heaven realm and protecting us and things like that. That's not the idea of protection. That's not the idea of refuge. The idea of sarana is that, first of all, we recognize that there is something that is bigger than me. There's something that is larger than this egocentric way in which I tend to live my life. Right? That's the first and the most important qualifier of sarana. So the moment we are able to see that, the moment we are able to see that, yes, there is something that is bigger, brighter, then what happens is it starts reducing my sense of ego. Immediately there is an inborn humility. There is an inborn softness. Right? Yes, this is larger than who I am. This is something that if I have commitment towards all of this, it will protect me because the result is going to be wholesome. I've tried it. I've experienced it. I've bitten into the mango, tasted the flesh, and I know that it's sweet. Right? Same way. So you know that's another aspect of sarana. So first is that there is something that's larger than me. And there is something that if I stick with this, it's going to give me really good results. So again, these aspects of saddha come in. But then the result of that is that this self-centric, egocentric approach starts diminishing as a result of this, right? So humility comes in, a kind of joy comes in, a kind of idea that there is something that is greater than me, myself, my problems, and there is something that is going to be beneficial, benevolent, blessing, all of these lovely words that come into it. Right? And sarana, so once we recognize that, we see that there is something that's bigger than me, and there is something that offers me a good way forward, then what I do is, just as how saddha has its own sense of power that starts building up inside me, sarana has this, I flow into it. I become part of that. I lose myself in the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha. So that's why in a lot of the suttas, the Buddha uses the phrase sarang buddhana sasananti. Sarang is to flow. It also means an arrow. You know, when you take an arrow and you release it, the flight of the arrow is called sara. The way a river flows is called sara. So sarati, I flow into this thing that I'm taking refuge in, this thing that is much greater than who I am. Right? So saddha, sarana. Then anusati. You have all of these ideals. You're told of the Buddha as this wonderful human being, and we read about the Buddha, we are taught about the Buddha, and this is so inspiring, right? And then we read some of the suttas, and these suttas are so uplifting, so inspiring. We see people around us who live life in a certain way, who espouse certain values, and they inspire us, right? And it becomes so precious, it becomes so valuable. So then, when we recollect all of those qualities over and over and over again, we want to start being like them. We want to start living in that way. Um, Leading by example, learning through experience, all of that. Anusati. So, sati, the word in Pali is sati, in Sanskrit it's smriti, and it means mindfulness, but it also means remembering, means bringing to mind and holding in mind. So whenever we look at the three jewels, the triple gem, then there are all of these qualities that we can bring into our hearts, we can bring into our mind, that can really help us in our practice. So sometimes we may be working with the breath, we may be working with sensations, we may be doing asubha bhavana over time, or metta bhavana, whatever your chosen object of meditation is. Over time, if a sense of lethargy creeps in, if a sense of restlessness creeps in, then you change your object. Start doing anusati. Remember the qualities of the Buddha. Remember the qualities of the Dhamma. Remember the qualities of the Sangha. And this is one of the important teachings that Buddha gives Mahamoggalana. When Mahamoggalana is meditating and there's a lot of sloth and torpor, the Buddha says, Moggallana, remember the virtues of the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha. There are 6 other things he teaches Mahamoggalana. But then this is an important aspect. Use this as an anusati. Use this as a point of remembrance. Use this as your touchstone. And what I'll do is after this session, I'll upload or maybe I already did. I don't know. But, the chant that we did as we opened, the Tiratana Guna, Itipiso Bhagava. So that actually expands on the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, right? So if it's not on the drive, I'll put it up on the drive. But read that. It's so inspiring, right? So you have Saddha, Sarana, and Anusati. You see value in something, you get committed to it, you see its benefit, and then you constantly remember it. After that, what happens is everything that is done with these 3 aspects forming part of our life, forming part of our practice, forming part of who we are, forming part of our persona, then everything that we do, think, see, say, speak, everything is rooted in kusala, wholesomeness. So again, another Pali word, kusala in Pali, kushala in Sanskrit. Kusala means wholesome. Kusala is the negation of wholesome, which is unwholesome, right? And mula is the root. So whenever we think of the triple gem or the 3 jewels, we recognize all the virtues that are part of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And this becomes the root of the wholesomeness that we inculcate within ourselves. So these are kind of some aspects as to why the triple gem is very, very useful. And then another kind of aspect, why are they called the three gems? Why are they called the three jewels? Right? Why can't we just say, I don't know, the three blessings? Right? Well, there is a reason for that. First of all, these three aspects, whether it's internally represented or externally manifested, doesn't matter. The Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. First of all these things are extremely precious, right? And they're precious because they cannot be assigned a value. Can anyone assign a value on awakening? 4 million, $5 million, uh, or the truth of the present moment? Can we? You can't assign a value to it. So because these cannot be assigned a value, they are extremely precious. So that is one aspect of why these are called Ratana, Tiratana, or the three Ratana. Triratana in Sanskrit, Tiratana in Pali. First of all, it's precious but because it cannot be assigned a value. Now, okay, so we say something is precious, but it can lose value over time. So how you see 4 centuries ago, gold was really precious, right? Today there's platinum. Platinum is more precious than gold. So in reality, the preciousness aspect of gold has diminished, right? But for the Tiratana, the three jewels, the preciousness is everlasting, right? It is enduring. That preciousness is enduring because these three things are beyond time. They are timeless. These are what are called Akalika Dhamma, right? Because they are timeless, their inherent value does not diminish. Their inherent value does not fluctuate. So it doesn't mean that the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha have a certain value today and maybe 30 years down the line it's going to have lesser value. That depends on us and our conduct and our commitment, right? So the second aspect, the first aspect is that they are precious. Along with being precious, they are enduring. The third thing is they are universal. So they are precious, they are enduring, and they are universal. They're universal because they transcend this quality of place, right? The inherent qualities of the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha are same whether you're in America or whether you're in Thailand or whether you're in India or whether you're in New Zealand. It's the same when you're in the earth realm or in the heaven realms or in the hell realms. Probably it's the same when you're on Earth and Mars or Jupiter. Doesn't really matter. But these three things, the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha, they are called Ratana because they're precious, value cannot be assigned to them. They transcend time, they are timeless. So there is no fluctuation in the inherent value. Having no fluctuation in the inherent value, it is also universally applicable. So this is why, this idea that the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha are represented or classified as jewels or Ratana to signify their value. That's why in the previous slide, we saw the picture of these three wheels. And it's the same three wheels in this picture here. There's a man holding it up. Is that because they're so precious, because they're so enduring, because they're so universal, they stand high above us, right? They provide us with an opportunity for us to be committed to something much bigger than who we are. Allows us the opportunity to flow in, merge with, become part of something that's much larger than us. Offers us the opportunity to remember the values, virtues, and qualities of all these things, and thereby becoming the root of wholesomeness that we can cultivate inside. Okay, great. So, I'm just looking at when, okay, so it's up, so interactive. Okay, we're good. I have I have a little list that tells me when we have the break and when we have that interactive piece and things like that. Okay, so now that we've spoken about the three gems and the three jewels, sorry, the first thing is not very clearly visible. I'm running this through. Anyway, so the first line is Siddhartha's story, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit. So now we're going to unpack the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So just before this, we spoke about why they are called the jewels, why they are called gems. We spoke about the inherent qualities of the triple gem, which is Saddha, Anusati, Sarana, and Kusalamula. So now we'll unpack each of them. So we've all heard the Buddha story, right? That the Buddha was born as a prince, and when he was born, the astrologer told his father, "O great king, your son will either be a wheel-turning monarch, a Chakravartin, or he'll become a world-renowned ascetic, a teacher of gods and humans." So the dad gets scared. No, my son, he has to be the next king. He has to increase the empire. He has to get more glory, more greatness, right? So he kind of he makes sure the Buddha leads a very, very sheltered, cloistered life. He has 3 palaces, 1 palace for the hot season, 1 palace for the rainy season, 1 palace for the cold season, and 1 palace, these 3 palaces, and then all of these palaces are equipped and fitted with every possible pleasure, human pleasure that one can imagine. So this idea of suffering should never be revealed to the Buddha, right? So even in this, you see, we must appreciate the intelligence of King Suddhodana to kind of understand that, oh, if my son sees suffering, then he'll go off and he'll become an ascetic. Suddhodana actually recognizes this. No one talks about that. No one gives him that credit, right? But then if he didn't recognize it, he wouldn't have done that. Right? He would not have cloistered the Buddha like that. So anyway, for whatever reason, the Buddha leads a very cloistered life. Oh, sorry. The Buddha leads a very cloistered life. He's kind of, he doesn't see any kind of suffering. He doesn't see old age, sickness, death. None of these things are revealed to him. So he gets curious. One day he goes out, and then he comes across these 4 sights: an old person, a sick person, a corpse, and then a renunciant, a sadhu or a sannyasin, an ascetic. And he immediately recognizes that, okay, this is, there's something here. So I need to investigate. Life isn't about just me being in the palace, being surrounded by all this pleasure. And in the Pali, this is referred to as samvega. Vega is speed. Samvega is something that impels a sense of speed, right? So samvega. And what is the speed? It is the speed to let go of suffering and reach a state of enduring, long-lasting, if possible, permanent happiness. That's it. So that is samvega. So then the Buddha sees these 4 sights, and then he says, okay, I must find a solution to all of the suffering. So he identifies that the root or the common thread of all this, when someone becomes old or during this process of aging, it involves a lot of suffering. Death involves a lot of suffering for the person who dies and for the people who are left behind. Sickness Obviously, there's a lot of suffering. There's pain, there's discomfort, all of the things, right? So he sees, okay, so this is the common thread. The common thread is suffering. And it's not limited to one person. This suffering seems to be universal. Whoever I see, I can see is kind of suffering. So he says, all right, what can we do about this? So it's interesting, even though he's a prince, he doesn't say, okay, I'll build a hospital for the sick, or I'll feed everyone who's hungry, or I'll open an old age home. He says, no, I need to go into the root. What causes all this? What is it that causes suffering? If all of these conditions, old age, sickness, death, all these are conditions, the thing that binds all of these conditions together, wraps all of these things together, is this thing we call dukkha, this thing we call suffering. Then it's not enough if I just alleviate the symptoms by building a hospital or an old age home or whatever. I mean, not we need all that. And really, the people who work in all of these places, they do a wonderful job. I'm not diminishing the value of those things. I'm just trying to retrace the possible way in which this thought process might have happened. That instead of bringing comfort to the symptom, he wanted to go into the root, right? And this is the most significant aspect of the Buddha's renunciation, is that instead of looking at the symptom and trying to alleviate it, he said, no, I have to leave this place. I have to leave all of these pleasures. I have to get out of this, and I have to study this. I have to study the root cause of this dukkha. And I have to find a way by which this dukkha can be transcended, not just myself, not just for myself, but for the welfare of all human beings. Hitam deva manusana, not only for humans, but for all other forms of life, right? Sentient beings, beings in the hell realms, beings in the heaven realms, all of these. Hitam, hitam deva manusana, for devas and manusas, for all of these satta, for all sentient beings. Right? In fact, I think it was Trijang Rinpoche, but I don't remember exactly if it was Trijang Rinpoche or probably His Holiness. But one of them actually said, I'm just trying to formulate. Yeah, I think it was His Holiness who actually, or was it Mingyur Rinpoche? Anyway, one of them, they said, in order to identify suffering, right, in order to identify dukkha, you need to have a happy mind. Right? This is the contradiction here. So then the Buddha recognizes, okay, this is the problem. The problem is dukkha. And I need to get out of this thing called dukkha. And therefore, I need to cultivate a sense of strength. I need to cultivate certain resources within me that will allow me to pierce through this thing that we call dukkha and to reach this thing called the end of dukkha, dukkha nirodha gamini patipada. And so it's really, and that is the significance of his awakening itself. That first of all, he says, first of all, he finds the common thread. Then he says, I must get out of this, and I must make sure that that there is a path available for all beings to get out of this. And this, I think, is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who said that when you lead a spiritual life and you have a practice, you can't really hurry it. And we all say nibbana in this lifetime, end of suffering in this lifetime. And then we sit and we practice, and we have to do this 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. And I have to learn 52 suttas in 52 days. But he says, you can't really hurry the spiritual life. But the one thing that can actually add a very wholesome impetus to it is this wish to be of help to others. And I find this so uplifting, so beautiful, so wonderful. And I think this is where the idea of a bodhisattva actually is born. This aspect of helping others, of being of value to others, everyone first, me last, is so anyway. So I'm getting carried away here. But yes, this idea of transcendence, this idea of transcending suffering, right, was not just something he wanted to do for himself. He wanted to do for everyone, right? So that's the story, the significance of his renunciation, the significance of his awakening. Now, apparently, this story of the Buddha seeing these 4 signs and then deciding to go into the forest and practice doesn't actually happen in Prince Siddhartha's life, but it happened in a previous Buddha's life, Vipassi Buddha, I think. And then it was brought into the history of Siddhartha and the present Gautama Buddha because it was such a good story. Again, this is scholastic. I don't, but I've heard Ajahn Amaro talk about this, and he would never say anything without checking 3 times at least. So anyway, so that's the story of the Buddha. And now, next thing we come to is the Dhamma. And like we said, like how the Buddha, you have the historical personage on the outside who stands as this ideal, but inside is the possibility of awakening that exists within us. And so too, the Dharma or the Dhamma is characterized by the teachings of the Buddha that are preserved in the 3 baskets, or the Tripitaka in Pali, Tripitaka in Sanskrit. And this is basically divided into 3 aspects: the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the monastic discipline, which is used by the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, bhikshus and bhikshunis. And you have the Sutta Pitaka, which is the teachings of his sutras, which are used by both lay people and by the monastics, and the Abhidhamma, which is kind of a combination of Buddhist psychology, Buddhist epistemology, Buddhist soteriology, all of these kind of philosophical aspects of the Buddha's teachings. So all these 3 things form what is called the Pali canon. Also the canon in Sarvastivada, in Vajrayana, and in Mahayana. So externally, this is usually referred to as the Dhamma, which is the teachings of the Buddha. And typically, when one says the Dhamma, they refer to the Sutta Pitaka. So all of these different suttas that are present in the Sutta Pitaka. And that's why, especially in the Ajahn Chah Sangha, and particularly in the Thai forest tradition, we always use the word Dhamma Vinaya. We never say Dhamma alone or Vinaya alone. Because for practice to really take shape, you need a certain discipline, which is provided by the Vinaya, and you need a certain element of teaching, which is elucidated in the suttas. Okay? So you need both sutta, and therefore the Buddha's teaching is always referred to as the Dhamma Vinaya. Now, it doesn't mean that the lay people cannot, because they don't have a Vinaya. Of course, they have a Vinaya. For the lay people, the Vinaya is the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, in some cases, 10 precepts, right? So it's basically a discipline. It's a container that gives you a boundary within which we function and gives us the do's and don'ts of how to function within this boundary. Right. So, in one of the chants that we chant at the end of the Patimokkha recitation, the Buddha is called Achara Gochara Sampanna. So, Sampanna is someone with high panya, high prajna, sampanya. He knows really well. What does he know really well? Achara, conduct, and Gochara, the field in which this conduct has to be applied. Right? So you have an area of functioning, and within that area of functioning, you have a way in which you function. And this becomes particularly important to monastics because we have a certain limited area. We don't get involved in politics. We don't get involved in making money. We don't get involved. But you can have those limits too. Lay people have those limits too. They need not be involved in speculation. They need not get involved in gambling. They need not get involved in anything to do with violence or destruction, need not get involved in sexual misconduct. So then that becomes their gochara. So the word gochara means it means a pasture. So cows and goats and all that. So these are similes that the Buddha used many, many years ago. Right? So if you notice cows and goats and all that, they know what their pasture is. They know where they have to go. And if they go beyond that, then they know there's a wolf or a bear or something that will attack them. Just as a cow or a goat knows that if it leaves its pasture, it gets into danger, even so, a spiritual aspirant should know that if he or she leaves these certain areas, these certain fields, there's danger waiting. What is the danger? It is the danger of getting involved in anything unwholesome. Right? So, achara, gochara, sampanna. So, achara is way of behavior, gochara, which is the field of behavior, all that is provided by the Vinaya. And then how we actually cultivate good qualities, wholesomeness, how we reduce the unwholesome, increase the wholesome. All these things are found in the Sutta Pitaka. And the Abhidhamma Pitaka is a higher elucidation of all of that. So basically, this is the canon. And then when we talk about the canon, especially in Theravada, the kind of basis from which or basis on which everything that the Buddha builds upon are the Four Noble Truths. So one of the similes that is used in the suttas is the Four Noble Truths are called, and this is simile, I think, used by Venerable Sariputta. He says that if you look at an elephant's footprint, this footprint can hold all the footprints of all, can hold the footprints of all the other animals, right? Because it's wide, it's large. So you have a footprint of an elephant, and you can have a cow's hoofs, a cow hoof's footprint. You can have the footprint of a dog, a cat, whatever. Just like how a cow's footprint can hold the footprints of all of these other animals, so too does the Four Noble Truths hold all of the other teachings of the Buddha inside them. So very often the Four Noble Truths are relegated as Buddhism 101. Oh yeah, we know that. There's suffering, the origin, cessation, path, we know all that. But no, really, that understanding the Four Noble Truths themselves is probably the work of one or a few lifetimes. It's not as basic as that. It's not something that can be relegated. And if the more we delve into the Four Noble Truths and the more we try and understand the Four Noble Truths, all the various aspects of the diverse teachings of the Buddha start exposing themselves. Right? So we'll talk about the Four Noble Truths in a bit. So they're called the Noble Truths. the word is Arya. In Pali, it's Arya. In Sanskrit, it's Arya. So Arya Satyam in Pali, Arya Satyam in Sanskrit, or Arya Satyam in Sanskrit. So why is it called Arya? Why is it called noble? Well, first of all, it's extremely noble in its motivation. And we'll talk about what the motivation of the Four Noble Truths are in a minute, in the next slide. But the motivation of the Four Noble Truths is extremely, or motivation of this construct of the Four Noble Truths by itself is very noble. Therefore, it is called noble. The content is noble. What the Four Noble Truths are, what they stand for, what they represent is noble, and their effect is noble. And hence, they are not only noble truths, they're also noble truths because they ennoble the person who practices the Four Noble Truths. Because it takes us from gross levels of functioning, gross levels of understanding, gross levels of thinking, to very subtle levels of understanding, thinking, conduct, all of this. Keeps constantly taking us from the unwholesome to the wholesome. Right? When we are within this gochara, when we are within this field of conduct, and we are following achara, we are following this method of conduct, then automatically we start letting go of the wholesome and we start accumulating or cultivating what is wholesome. Takes us from delusion to clarity. Even in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha keeps saying over and over and over again, Suvisuddhang Jnanadasanang Ahosi. So, vision of the truth became, the vision of the truth manifested in itself in all its purity. Not just Suddhang or Visuddhang, Su-Visuddhang, ultimate purity. Jnanadasan, this vision of the truth, vision of jnana. So it takes us from delusion to clarity, and finally takes us from samudaya, which is we, instead of creating more and more dukkha for ourselves, it teaches us how to start, how that dukkha can actually cease. So it takes us from samudaya to nirodha. So instead of creating more and more dukkha for ourselves, it trains us, it teaches us to bring about the cessation of that very dukkha. Bear with me, we'll have a break pretty soon. So some things before we get into the actual Four Noble Truths, and I think this is fairly important. So many people, is when I speak to them, they say, okay, the Four Noble Truths is all about getting rid of dukkha and achieving sukha. Or in other words, getting rid of unhappiness and achieving a state of happiness. Not, that's faulty understanding. It's faulty understanding. And I'll come to why. So when the Buddha talks about the Four Noble Truths, he approaches it as a healer would approach a disease. Right? That's why he's called Vaisajya Guru, the teacher of healing, the great doctor, the great scientist, however you want to phrase that or translate that. So he says, all of us have a disease. Okay. This disease manifests itself in a symptom. The symptom that shows the presence of the disease is dukkha, suffering. So whenever I suffer, I know that yes, suffering has come up. And instead of looking at why the suffering has come up, I start running away with the suffering, right? And hence, the goal of my existence is how do I reduce the suffering and how do I maximize pleasure? How do I reduce pain? How do I maximize pleasure? This is a very short-term view. It's not going to solve the problem. We'll talk about more of that later. But anyway, he says we all have a disease. This disease is, the symptom of this disease is dukkha. Right? Now, this dukkha has a cause. It has a samudaya, it has a point of origin. Right? The point of origin of this symptom is tanha, desire or greed. Actually, it's not even desire or greed, it's tanha's thirst. It's very, very powerful, very, so yeah, it's tanha, thirst. That is the cause. Then the Buddha says, but here's the prognosis, right? Here's how this disease is going to progress. There is a way of getting rid of this disease. You can cure it completely. Asesa viraga nirodha, not just nirodha, but asesa viraga nirodha. You can get rid of it without the slightest trace, without the slightest tinge, right? Asesa viraga nirodha. So that's the prognosis. And then the prescription is the Noble Eightfold Path, is the Magga, the path. So if we say symptom is dukkha, cause is samudaya, prognosis is nirodha, prescription is Magga. What is the disease? See, this is where we think, oh, the disease itself is dukkha. But no, dukkha is just the symptom. The disease is avidya. Avidya in Pali, avidya in Sanskrit. And then what happens when we reach the end of avidya? We come to a state of well-being. Suvisuddham jnanadasana. As the Buddha states in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. There's a copy of that in the Google Drive. Please read when you have a moment. But this is the whole idea. So the spiritual path of the Four Noble Truths is not a conflict between pain and pleasure. It's not a getting rid of dukkha in order to grab sukha. But the whole pursuit is the ending of avidya in Sanskrit, avidya in Pali. Right? And when you're well, then what happens is Suvisuddha Jnanadasana Hosi. This vision of knowledge manifests itself in its pristine purity, in all its purity. Okay, so this is one point I wanted to make before we start looking at the Noble Truths. So the disease is avidya or avidya, symptom is dukkha, cause is tanha, samudaya, the cause is tanha. Prognosis is that there is an end to it, nirodha, and the prescription is the Magga, the Noble Eightfold Path. So then, the Four Noble Truths themselves. So what did the Buddha say? Buddha said that there is suffering. Now, an important point to keep in mind here is that it's not my suffering. Right? Yeah, of course I suffer, but then that's not the point. The point is to objectify the suffering. Right? So instead of looking at it as my suffering and getting into this whole rat race of I must get rid of this and I must find something that is pleasurable, and instead of that, objectify it, then the result is different. So there is suffering. The Buddha said that there are three types of suffering. So jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, maranampi dukkham, soka parideva dukkhado manasupayasa dukkha. Those are the words in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And this is kind of categorized by this phrase dukkha dukkha, basic suffering. It is the suffering that is primarily experienced through the body, through old age, through disease, through sickness, through death, then lamentation, grief, despair, all of these things, dukkha dukkha. Then you have this thing that is viparinama dukkha, the dukkha that comes through change. The Buddha says, appiyehi sampayogo dukkho, piyehi vipayogo dukkho. So whenever I love something and that thing is taken away from me, that causes me dukkha. Whenever I don't want something and that thing is put into my life, that causes dukkha. So this is called the dukkha of change, viparinama dukkha. And yes, these two are fairly evident, and we can experience these types of dukkha again and again. And we see this in daily life. But then there's a very subtle form of dukkha that kind of underpins these two as well. And this is something that is difficult to recognize. This is what is called sankitta dukkha. So anything that we take, whether it's our body, whether it's our mind, whether it's our thoughts, whether it's anything physical, sentient beings, non-sentient objects, all of these things are constructed, right? Sankara, sankitta, put together with doing, sankarati, with doing, with creating, with fabrication. So anything that is fabricated, anything that is put together is by nature susceptible to dukkha. Because if I have to create something, I have to fabricate something, it is the result of certain conditions coming together. If one of those conditions change, this whole thing falls apart. So this inherent nature of anicca, this inherent nature of loss of control, anatta, we'll look at anatta in detail, is what is called sankitta dukkha. So this inherent unsatisfaction, dissatisfaction, unpleasantness, suffering, inherent to conditions, that is called sankitta dukkha. So there are, so when you look at dukkha, kind of try and look at it from this viewpoint. And these are good ways of actually objectifying it. So instead of saying, this is my suffering, I'm suffering, poor me, I have to get rid of this, objectify it. There are various ways of objectifying it. First thing is to realize this is not my suffering. This is suffering that has arisen because one or more conditions have changed or fallen apart. Right? And then the cause itself of suffering is tanha, thirst. And in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, this is how the Buddha kind of elucidates this at that time, and it's pertinent even today. There's Kama Tanha, Bhava Tanha, Vibhava Tanha. So Kama Tanha is a thirst for anything sensual, right? Anything that gives pleasure to the sense doors. So if I look at something beautiful, it gives me a lot of pleasure. So I want more and more and more. If I hear something, touch something, taste something, kama tanha. So anything that is sensual, that can be pleasing, pleasant, attractive, and it's not just pleasing, pleasant, attractive. So it's not a negation of everything that's pleasing, pleasant, and attractive. But the problem is with the tanha, this becomes almost like an addiction. I keep wanting more and more and more and more. Nothing satisfies me. If I have 2 units today, I need 4 units tomorrow. So that's one type of tanha. Other type of tanha is this thirst to become. I have to become a good monk. I have to become a good human being. I have to become a good mother, a good father, good lover, good whatever, good whatever, right? This addiction to becoming, I have to become better. And this addiction to getting rid of, resisting, pushing away, right? I am a greedy person, so I don't want greed. So I cultivate greed by having greed for this thought of not wanting greed, not wanting to be greedy, right? So vibhava tanha, this kind of pushing away, negating. So these are the causes of dukkha. Then he says there is an end, nirodha, asesa viraga nirodha. This is absolutely, you get rid of this tanha, this craving, without even a trace. Chago patinisago mukti analayo. So I just wanted to make another point here. So when you read the translations of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, it says, Chaga, Patinisagga, Mukti, Analaya. So it says the giving up, relinquishment, freedom, non-abiding of this dukkha, of tanha. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that, to me, it seems as if when tanha comes to an end, when there is nirodha, at a moment of nirodha, there exists chaga, patinisagga, mukti, and analaya. And we'll talk about all these in a minute. So chaga, what is chaga? Chaga is often translated as generosity. Sometimes it's, so chaga in Pali, Sanskrit is tyaga, tyaga. So sometimes it's translated as generosity, sometimes it's translated as sacrifice, sometimes it's translated as letting go. It's murky. One cannot understand what this thing actually is. Patinisagga is the same thing. They say letting go, relinquishing, abandoning. Again, very, very unclear. But it becomes clear with an example. And I'll give you a very dumbed down example, but it's an example nevertheless that allows us to see the difference between chaga and patinisagga. So let's say I'm in the meal line and there's a slice of chocolate cake that's offered. Let's say the monk behind me is Tanpadipo. There's only one slice of chocolate cake left, and I really love chocolate cake. But I know that this chocolate cake will give Tanpadipo, I mean, this is just an example. I don't know if this is true or not. But let's say I think, oh, I love this slice of chocolate cake. If I eat it, I'm going to be really happy. But if Tanpadipo eats it, he's going to love it too. So I value his happiness more than I value my happiness, and I decide not to eat that, not to take that. That is chaga. That is a good example of chaga, where I put the happiness of others at a higher level than my own happiness. Right? Give it more prominence, give it more importance. Patinisagga is this kind of the same thing. The result is the same, but the approach is different. So same example, meal line, chocolate cake, last piece. But I know I love chocolate cake, and I know if I take it and eat it, it's going to give me a lot of happiness. But I also know that I'm diabetic. So I don't take that chocolate cake. Right? So I get rid of short-term pleasure for long-term benefit. That is patinisagga. Right? So you see the difference. So chaga and patinisagga. But both of these happen when there's nirodha, because there's no tanha. Right? Then there's mukti, freedom, absolute freedom. I'm not constrained. There's no stress. So when there's tanha, another aspect of tanha, another aspect of craving, is that along with that craving, it comes with an immediate demand for satisfaction. It comes with a certain urgency. It comes with an ugly kind of, I want it now. Give it to me now. That causes a lot of stress. That's why people become addicts. Right? So you're released from that. There's freedom from that. Freedom from that demand. Freedom from that immediate sense of satisfaction, demand of satisfaction. Analaya. And there is this thing called, so alaya is a place of residence. Analaya is a place of non-abiding. So with the nirodha, this tanha actually doesn't abide. Right? So in this moment of cessation, we can experience chaga, patinisagga, mukti, and alaya. That's the way I like to look at it. Because otherwise it becomes too confused. Like, why should the Buddha say chaga, patinisagga, mukti, and alaya, all of these different things just by saying asesa, viraga, nirodha? But this is very inspiring. Like in that moment of nirodha, I can actually experience chaga, patinisagga, mukti, and analaya. Because of that asesa, viraga, nirodha. And finally, the path, which is magga, which is sila, samadhi, and panya. Again, I'll see if I can, sila, samadhi, and panya. Um, so, and we'll talk about Sila, Samadhi, and Panya in the forthcoming sessions. So this is kind of the Dharma aspect of the teaching. So I think this, I know I've gone way over time, but this is a good place to kind of stop, take a break, and then Sachin will now put you into your breakout rooms. So if you could quickly discuss which noble truth resonates with you right now. So that's the discussion. Which noble truth resonates most with you right now? Okay. So discuss that, take a 5 minute break. So don't discuss it for too long because, and then we'll meet back at 10 past 8. Okay. So Sachin, if you can break them out. Thank you.
So everyone should have been given the option to join. So Priyani or Solia, and I'm not sure who's on the iPad. Are you able to enter your breakout room? Bante, I'm also going to pause the recording now because we can't. Yeah, okay.
Resume your
So we, Bante, we voluntold Karen to be the speaker
okay.
because I do have to step out for 1 minute. So Karen,
Hi, Venerable. Yeah.
Hi.
In the break room, we talked about the different aspects of the Four Noble Truths that resonated. And the one that most resonated was, of course, craving. That's one thing that we all see every day. That we we try to tell ourselves that this is craving, but we still fall for it. But
Right.
said there's a gap between the two, so which is wonderful because there is a gap between the craving and the actual suffering, and that's where liberation lies, isn't it? Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good way of putting it.
Yeah, I thought
Absolutely.
Mark really hit the nail on the head.
Mhm.
I think the part that Faye talked about is that she saw it as the elephant's footprint to be very, very useful. The idea that everything falls within this elephant footprint, and all these teachings will have to be encompassed under the Four Noble Truths, which is pretty much it's the framework in which we study and we understand how suffering arises and ceases within that. And for me, I thought that was, that your elaboration on suffering was very, very resonant because not only do you suffer pain, aging, change, but the most subtle part of it is the compounded nature of all suffering. Because, the fact that it's compounded, it can be uncompounded. The whole idea that liberation lies within what Mark talked about, which is the gap between the two, and to see the uncompounded property of that. So so that's
Wonderful.
what was our breakthrough.
Great. Thank you. Thank you,
Marjorie, I
Karen.
hope I'm all right.
Sorry, I missed that last part.
No, I said Marjorie, I hope I'm all right. I hope I
Oh,
summarized it all right.
yeah,
thank
it's
you,
great.
Karen. I
Thank
just had to step out, so that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I can go for our group number 3 if you like.
Sure.
And
Sita, hi.
Sita, hi. We've a lot of the people in our group mentioned that the dukkha is standing out for us right now, and experiencing suffering and kind of not wanting certain things that are causing the suffering, and having difficulty kind of stepping back and objectifying it. We also talked to one member of our group talked about suffering from old age and sickness, as that is coming up in her life. And then one member of our group was thought that tanha stood out for her, the craving and the wanting to become and to be better and to always do more and accomplish more. So that's the summary for us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Sita. Thank you. Yeah. And group number 3. Yeah, these insights are so valuable because, it kind of emphasizes, it brings out the importance and what people have actually, what people are experiencing right now. So it's a great way of cultivating empathy, understanding, viewing things from different perspectives. So, yeah, so group number 3.
I was group 3, but
Okay, well, the next group.
Yeah. So I was in group number 1, and I similarly was voluntold to speak on our behalf.
Okay, and your name?
My name is Jody.
Jody, great. Thank you, Jody. Right.
Sure thing. So by count, we had 2 dukkha's and 3 tanhas. Yeah, I mean, I think we all sort of, I guess those things are deeply enough related, but whatever, for some of us, what was really standing out today is just, whew, what a day. And I guess we were the dukkha's. And maybe the tanhas were able to be a little more circumspect about the cause of their suffering today.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is that, these things often change. So whatever's prominent now is because of a certain set of causes and conditions. Once there is a change or a shift in one of those causes or conditions, then the aspect changes as well. But that was wonderful. Anything else, Jody?
No, I think that's all I got for tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Okay, so then I'm just kind of hurrying on because of time. So let's do a little bit of guided meditation. And before we start, just a few things to say. So today, the technique we are going to be working with is called Anapanasati, right? And this is generally working with the breath. Okay? And all of you I'm sure, would be very familiar with this. It's a very commonly used technique. And it is basically sati is to be aware or to recollect, to bring into awareness, to be mindful. Ana is the in-breath, pana is the out-breath. So just being aware, bringing the in-breath and the out-breath into awareness, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is being available to the breath, right? So your awareness, your sense of cognition, your sense of recognition, all of this is being available to the breath. And I'll just tell you a little bit of the backstory of how the Buddha first taught Anapanasati. And the story then gives us an understanding of the attitude that the Buddha wants us to adopt when we do Anapanasati, right? So the Buddha is with his Sangha and has a lot of monks. And he teaches them this meditation called Asubha Bhavana, that is recognizing the unpleasant characteristics or aspects of the body. So he teaches this to them. And Asubha Bhavana is often a technique or a mode of practice that is adopted to combat lustful states of mind and things like that. So he teaches the Sangha the Asubha Bhavana technique, and then he says, okay, I'm going to go on retreat. So he goes on retreat, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks or something. Then when he comes back, he finds that the size of the Sangha is quite reduced. So he asks Venerable Ananda, he says, Ananda, what happened? You know, when I left, there were so many monks, and now it seems like there are just half or even less. What happened to all of them? So Venerable Ananda says, oh Lord, you know, you taught them Asubha Bhavana. They were very diligent. They were very committed. And they started seeing so much unpleasantness in their bodies that they decided many of them either ran away or many of them killed themselves. So the Buddha says, oh my God, this is not, right? This is just a story, right? But the story has a point. The Buddha says, oh my God, this is not on. Like, so he says, okay, monks, come, sit down. You don't have to take this far, right? The body is not that bad that you have to end it, right? But what you can do is, now I'll teach you something by which you can calm your body, calm your thoughts, calm your mind. So the most important element or aspect of Anapanasati is that it promotes a sense of calm, it promotes a sense of well-being, it promotes a sense of love, right? So this is a very gentle approach to the breath. It's not something that you have to be militant with. You're not combating everything. You're not trying to negate thoughts. You're not trying to stop thinking. You're not trying to anesthetize yourself. You're trying to be available, trying to be open. We are trying to cultivate a sense of non-resistance and a sense of very gentle, kind, easeful abiding. Right? So the story itself of how Anapanasati originates, it shows us that the Buddha wanted to take the mind away from this aspect of judgment, this aspect of aversion, this aspect of tight stress, things like that, to an easeful abiding. And he says by practicing this, by practicing Anapanasati, one of the main benefits is that one can achieve a deep, deep sense of calm and relaxation. Okay? So having said that, that is the attitude by which indeed all meditation should be approached. The sense of open, easeful abiding. Right? And in many of the suttas, always the Buddha says, Pasu viharati. Viharati is to abide. Pasu is in a sense of ease, calm, relax, a relaxed state of well-being. So abiding in well-being. Okay. So that's the preamble. Now let's start with the meditation. So please take your meditation posture, and if you're sitting on the floor or if you're sitting on a chair, both are fine. We check in with the body to begin with. We want to ensure that we are upright, but at the same time not rigid. So you can adjust your posture, elongate your spine, and tuck your chin in slightly so that your spine is nice and elongated. And since we are working with the breath, it's always useful to kind of roll your shoulders back a little. And this opens up the chest area, expands the chest area, so that there is an unobstructed path for the breath to travel from the chest to the sternum to the abdomen and back. So with the body, the attitude, the posture gives us a sense of stability, but at the same time, a non-rigid, non-tight stability. The attitude of the mind, we check in with the mind, the mood of the mind, and the attitude is similar, a sense of stable commitment to be with the breath, but we are still being open, non-resistant, non-judgmental, kind, gentle, with everything else that may arise with the breath. So now, just watch the breath as it comes in and as it goes out. As it comes in, as it goes out. So this is not a shutting off of everything else. Thoughts may arise, sensations may arise, sounds may land into consciousness. Doesn't matter. Everything is there. Everything is welcome. But we are paying special attention to the breath. We are not trying to control the breath. So if the breath is short, we know that the breath is short. If the breath is long, we know that the breath is long. There's no need to shorten a long breath, no need to elongate a short breath. Breath as it is. Let's do that for a few minutes. If you've had a very busy, active day, it's very natural that your brain will be active. There'll be many, many thoughts. So an additional way of calming the mind would be including a mantra with your breath. So with the in-breath, you can say Buddh mentally. With the out-breath, you can say the whole, Buddho, awakening. Buddho, with Buddh, with the in-breath, Dho with the out breath. Adds an extra layer of recognition. As you breathe in, Bud. As you breathe out, Tho. Bud. Tho. Bud. Tho. Very gentle, open awareness, promoting ease, well-being, non-judgment. As you hear the gong, gently open your eyes, and we'll continue with the session. All right, so that was a very short kind of guided meditation just to give an idea of what Anapanasati is. So is there anyone who's not done this before or who's not familiar with Anapanasati? If there is, please just raise your hand. And okay, guess not. Okay, great. So yeah, just a few things. Oh, who raised you? Someone raised the hand. So if you can please unmute and
Hi, I raised the hand. My name is
okay.
Suganti.
Hi, Sugandhi.
Hi.
Okay,
I've never done this before.
okay. So I can't. Okay, hold on. Let me get your screen. Oh, there you are. Right. Okay. So, do you have any questions about this?
I like that I was able to focus on the two words in breaths and out breath. It helped me focus a little bit better, and
Yeah.
was less distractions with thoughts.
Mhm.
So I'm more curious about it now, so I'll look into it further, obviously.
Lovely. Yeah. So you can, so the words Buddho is something that Ajahn Chah promotes and used to teach a lot, and all of his students still teach. So you can use it while doing Anapanasati, you can do it while using walking meditation. If Buddho seems a little weird, sometimes Lumpo Viradamo says, may I be well with the in-breath, may I be free with the out-breath. So you can play around, substitute, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sumati. Okay, so let's move on, and then we'll have an option for questions and answers at the end. So now we looked at the Buddha and we looked at the Dhamma. So now we come to the third aspect of the triple gem or the three jewels, which is the Sangha. And usually, as I said, the word itself, it's the same in Pali and in Sanskrit. It just means a group, a collection, but what the Sangha actually represents is it's not just a group or a collection, but it's a group or a collection of people who have a um, a shared value, a shared goal, shared vision, shared aspirations, things like that. So we'll look at we'll look at these in a little more detail, but basically, um, just okay. Well, I'm trying to do something. I don't know how to do that. Okay. Um, oh, so there we are. So yes, so basically the Sangha is a group of people who have shared values, shared goals, who have a similar way of practicing, and they have a kind of shared vision. Now, technically, if you look at the suttas, there are various ways in which this word Sangha is used. So, in the Theravadan context, Sangha could be the Arya Sangha. So, it is usually referred, all the enlightened disciples of the Buddha would be called Arya Sangha. So, enlightened beings who are historical, like Venerable Sariputta, Mahamoggalana, Anatta, Mahakasapa, all of them. Teachers who are more recent and who are fully enlightened and fully awakened. Lumpur Cha, Lukta Mahabua, all of the other well-known teachers who are recognized as being fully awakened. So they are referred to as the Arya Sangha or the Noble Sangha. So when we look at the chants, the Sangha is often in the Pali canon referred to as the Arya Sangha, and then we have what is called the Savaka Sangha. So the Savaka Sangha are the Sangha group of people who are practicing. And generally, this is in a monastic context. So you have the Arya Sangha who are enlightened monastics, historical, or who are alive. Then you have the Savaka Sangha, the Sangha who's practicing, Sangha who's striving. So the word Savaka in Pali, Shravaka in Sanskrit has the same root as Shraddha or Saddha. So this is another important thing. So Saddha, Shraddha, the root means commitment, right? So Savaka or Shravaka has the same root. So these are the people who are committed to a certain lifestyle, to a certain practice. Generally, they are in robes, they live in monasteries, and they are practicing. Then you have the Atta Purisa Puggala Sangha. Atta and Purisa, so it's called the 8 pairs. And these are monks bhikkhus, nuns, bhikkhunis, laymen, laywomen. And so that's 4. And then these 4 are either unenlightened or enlightened. So you have 8. So this is how, the group of 8 or the group of 4 is kind of. So these are various ways of looking at the Sangha. Historically, kind of in the canon, this is how Sangha, the word Sangha is used, Sangha is referenced. Now, today, there are many groups that come together and practice, and these are primarily lay groups, and they are self-directed, self-led. There's a lot of peer review, peer support. So groups like the TBC, groups like the Ottawa Buddhist Society, groups like Satipanya. So these are all lay groups, but practitioners within that group refer to themselves as Sangha. And this is very true as well, because everyone has a common vision, common goal. They have agreed standards of behavior and things like that. So these are some of the ways in which the word Sangha is used. But then when we delve deeper into this concept of Sangha, especially the monastic Sangha, then we can kind of understand why the Buddha gave so much of importance to Sangha. Right? So the first thing is that all of us aspire. I'm not saying we are completely successful or that we do this all the time, but we aspire to be fields of merit. Right? Now, naturally, someone who has no hindrances, no affluence, no kilesas, they will be this field of merit all the time. It's perfectly, that becomes their nature. But for monastics like me who are still striving, this is still an aspiration, right? To be the field of merit. So the Pali word that is used is punya keta. Punya is merit, and punya is nothing but the result of wholesome action. So when we looked at the triple gem, we said that they one of the characteristics is that they are kusala mula. So they are rooted in what is wholesome. So there's nothing that's unwholesome. So when someone lives life in a way that it is completely wholesome or does wholesome action, the result of that wholesome action is called punya, merit. Now, the result of unwholesome action is papa, which is demerit or, demerit kind of sounds a little, but I'll find a better translation. But yeah, you get the idea. The result of wholesome action is punya. The result of unwholesome action is papa. So the Buddha said that the Sangha is or aspires to be punya keta, the field of merit. So we live life in a certain way, we espouse certain values, and what we do is make ourselves available so that these values are communicated to our wider community, to our larger community. And because we have these commitments to our set of values, we are then able to provide some guidance for lay people, right? And this is our vocation. This is our calling. This life of silence, this life of contemplation, this life of spiritual cultivation. Because of the generosity of lay people, this becomes our core raison d'etre. Like, we don't have to go out and work. We don't have to worry about many, many things that lay people have to worry about. And hence, the result of that cultivation, if we are sincere and if there is Shraddha, then the result is that we can provide guidance through this kind of practice. It's a very symbiotic relationship. The lay people provide the Sangha with the 4 requisites. So food, shelter, clothing, and medicines. So these are the 4 most basic requisites that everyone needs to live. And monastics, these become the requisites that we live by. So we are provided these requisites by lay people, and in return, we share our understanding of the Dhamma. We share the experience of meditation. Using that experience, we can guide lay people. It's a very symbiotic relationship. Another thing that the Sangha does is that there is a continued lineage, right? So when you take the Ajahn Chah Sangha, there's Lumpu Mang, Lumpu Sao, you have Ajahn Chah, then you have Lumpo Liam, Lumpo Sumedo, Lumpo Viradammo, and all of his peers. And then the people who, all of them ordained, like myself, Tan Sri Medo, Tan Padipo. So it forms a lineage. Okay. And this lineage is important because certain values, certain methods, certain views, certain opinions, not opinions, but certain ways of practice gets handed down from generation to generation. Right? And so this transmission becomes an unbroken lineage that we can tap into. So just the fact that we get together every fortnight, if there's a group of 4 monks, and if no one is sick, we recite the Patimokkha. So this has been going on from the time of the Buddha, a ritual that happens unbroken or has happened unbroken for the past 2,500 years. This holds immense value. This holds immense meaning, right? Immense aspiration, lot of inspiration. So along with that lineage comes a sense of tradition and a sense of culture. And basically, the Sangha then becomes a wonderful resource for knowledge sharing. So I just wanted to bring this aspect of how these kind of long-lasting monastic Sanghas are present in this life, in this very present day, even today. And usually in the suttas, there's a kind of beautiful line where Sangha acts as a living vehicle of the Dhamma. So the Dhamma or the Dharma is not just relegated to books on a bookshelf. There are people who live their lives totally committed and totally based on those teachings. So you can see how these teachings, how these teachings manifest in daily life. Okay? So then that becomes a wonderful resource for knowledge sharing. Along with Sangha, so yes, we said there is the Sangha, but then what does Sangha actually mean to those of us who are on the path? Well, first, Sangha provides noble friendship or Kalyana Mittata. So in Pali, the word is Kalyana Mittata, friendship that is auspicious, friendship that is a blessing. And it provides a sense of community. So a sense of community is that you know that you're with like-minded people, you know that these people are your kind of support net. So then I thought we could look at these two aspects. So in one of the suttas, it says, Venerable Ananda is having a conversation with the Buddha, and Venerable Ananda says, oh Lord, I've heard that noble friendship is half of the holy life, right? That's how efficacious it is, half of the holy life. Is that true? So the Buddha says, no, Ananda, that's not true. It's the whole of the holy life. So if you don't have noble friends, there's no way that your life can be holy. So then who is a noble friend? So the Buddha says, you should associate with a friend who has 7 qualities, characteristics, or 7 factors. And what are these 7? First is that they give what is hard to give, right? They do what is hard to do. So give what is hard to give. Well, what is the hardest thing to give? Well, it depends on situations and circumstances, but generally speaking, it is the giving of goodness, right? This aspect or this aspiration that whatever is important to my friend supersedes what is important to me, right? And therefore, I would strive to give something that is hard to give. Give the gift of patience, give the gift of understanding, basically embody a generous attitude, kind attitude. They do what is hard to do. So sometimes, I don't know, you may be a little grumpy, then a friend comes to you and wants to talk, and instead of saying, oh, get lost, I don't want to talk about it, you actually bear with whatever is going on inside, make yourself available for people when they want to talk. And we see that all the time, especially when you live in a monastery. Everyone is just so kind. There's no real sense of, I don't want to talk right now. Right? Endure what is hard to endure. So the friend, when one is grumpy and someone has a good friend, they say, okay, looks like you're grumpy. No problem. I'll come back later or talk to you later. Right? So all our kind of moods of anger, aversion, whenever they manifest, a good friend would be able to recognize that and do what is needed, probably endure it at that moment. Then pray, then maybe have a conversation later on. And so there's a lot of openness in this relationship, right? It's not just about um, having a sense of patience, having a sense of endurance. You actually share things that you've gone through with them, then they kind of share what they've gone through with you, and this is how trust is built, right? And it's important that you value that sense of discretion, that noble friendships will obviously value that sense of discretion, that sense of kind of non-gossiping. So they reveal their secrets to you and they keep your secrets. Don't abandon you in times of trouble. So there's absolutely no idea of there's no chance of what is called a fair weather friend. This is a phrase that's commonly used, right? Oh, he's a fair weather friend, or she's a fair weather friend. So when everything is okay, when the weather is fair, when it's actually nice and warm and sunny, they're friends. Then when it starts snowing or it becomes dark and damp and depressing, they're not nowhere in the picture, right? No. So they do not abandon you in times of trouble. So when you're in trouble, you know that, hey, if I go and speak to this person, I know I'll get the support I need. I know I get the help I'll need. So again, making oneself available. They don't look down on you in times of sorrow or in times of difficulty. So again, related. So then when we cultivate friendships like this, and in a community, when we have these shared values and shared aspirations, then what we derive from the sense of Sangha and from this group is that we derive a huge sense of encouragement. Yep, I did something wrong, but here are my brothers. They've put up with this. So I've got to do better. I shouldn't repeat this behavior in the future. So and then you get this, okay, it's okay. Yeah, I messed up, but I can do better. So huge sense of encouragement and support. Always there's guidance, right? So if values are not shared, and if behaviors, if there's no kind of mutual understanding of expect or mutual common standards of behavior, then you can't expect guidance. Right? So let's say my aspiration is something and then someone else has a totally different aspiration. I can't go to them for guidance with what I am aspiring for. So again, a very important aspect of Sangha is this aspect of guidance. Helps in cultivation. This is what we see in all your group when it meets every Sunday or when it meets every week or every month or whatever. Then there is a shared sense of cultivation, right? We know that people are striving, they're going in the same direction. And so let's help them. And as we spoke about conduct and field of conduct, this achara and gochara, that becomes a very shared, lived experience. So you can see, okay, when I'm angry, this is how I behave. When I'm kind of withdrawn or reserved, this is how I interact. But look at this other person. This is how they interact. So, wow, there's a lesson here. It could be inspiring, or it could be, no, maybe this isn't the way it's to be done. Either way, there's always a lesson to be learned. Right? And it brings about a huge sense of inner clarity. So very briefly, just touching upon Kalyana Mittata and Sangha, and this is what I wanted to share. Okay, so now we open it up for questions and answers. But just before that, what I wanted to, I'll just go through kind of a couple of things and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But basically the next session, so how this has been structured is that the opening session, which is Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, is fairly easy. It's fairly uplifting, inspiring. So the next thing we'll talk about Kamma, rebirth, or Kamma or karma, rebirth, Anatta. So this requires a certain introspection, a certain level of attention, a certain level of comprehension. So it will be a heavier kind of session. Theravada Buddhist community raised a hand. Sorry.
Yeah, it's me, it's Sachin. I just wanted to just note that since we are over time, if there are folks who won't be able to join us, won't be able to stay on any longer, what I'm gonna do is in the chat in a couple of moments, I'm gonna send a Google form in which you'd be able to send your questions, and I'll get the questions straight to you as soon as they're in, I'll send them to you. You'll have access.
Okay,
So,
no problem. So yeah, whoever wants to leave, please leave, and can always ask questions by emailing or putting, whatever Sachin said. Okay, so like I was saying, the next session is going to be a little more demanding. So one thing, like we did the Anapanasati meditation, guided meditation this time, I would recommend doing it on a daily basis. Even if you do it just for 10, 15 minutes, try and do it in the morning and in the evening. So that's a suggestion or an encouragement for continuity. And one thing that you can observe is that as you do the Anapanasati in the morning and evening, notice what happens to your breath during the day. So as you're working, or if you're in your family, or you come across some situation that's stressful, notice what happens to your breath. If you're extremely happy, delighted, joyful, notice what happens to the breath. If you're in a situation that is kind of, that makes you angry, then notice what happens to your breath. Okay. So, and then we'll talk about this in the next session. But during this week, from now till next Wednesday, try and do this Anapanasati meditation at least twice a day, 10, 15 minutes each time. And during the day, notice what happens to your breath as you face these different situations. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm really sorry to go over time. If there are any questions now, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, you can always put them in the form that Sachin will send.
Okay. So
okay, there you
go. There you go.
Now I can see
so
it.
Please join me in bowing 3 times to Bhante to thank him for these just so informative and so well laid out, and I can't wait to re-listen to them. So thank you, Bhante. Until next week, please join me.
Sukhi hotu. Sukhi hotu.